The virgin, the queen, the priestess, the witch, the healer, the oracle. Each one of these once holy faces of the divine feminine has been distorted, inverted, fractured, and even demonized. The virgin lost her innocence, the queen her sovereignty, the priestess lost her temple, the witch her sacred fire, the healer her boundaries, and the oracle her voice. But now that the divine feminine is rising and reawakening, they are returning whole and sovereign in remembrance of the beauty of the gifts that they once held. So in this video, the fifth in the Divine Feminine Awakening series, we're going to examine the feminine wounds, including primarily the sisterhood wound itself, and weave through the 6 primary archetypal distortions that have all stemmed from the origin of separation consciousness. Because through understanding these wounds, we can then reclaim the power and the gifts by integrating the wisdom that is contained within the wound itself. So, beginning with the Virgin is obviously associated mostly with the Virgin Mary. It is a symbol of purity and innocence, but even naivete. And what this word truly originally meant was sovereign, whole, and holy unto herself. What it meant was a woman who embodied the purity of her power. And that is a fundamental distinction from the inversion. She was inverted into repression, and her sexuality was disowned. And in truth, a woman fully embodied in her divine feminine essence and power has an intimate connection with her own sacred sexual essence. And then the queen, who embodied the energy of leadership and sovereignty and divine authority, was inverted into control or even martyrdom. We're going to get deeper into all of these archetypal distortions and wounds in a bit, but we're going to lay the foundation first with an overview. So then we have the priestess, who embodied this energy, this frequency of true spiritual power, of that divinely guided leadership and authority. And this was very much inverted into a frequency of manipulation, often of a sexual nature. A lot of the temples of the olden days, the priestesses became sex priestesses, and that frequency, that energy was siphoned, hijacked, distorted. And so that current, that energetic current of sexual distortion ran through the feminine consciousness, the female consciousness, especially those who have incarnated in previous lifetimes as a priestess. And it also turned into service without boundaries, particularly those bodily and sexual boundaries. So then we have the witch, which is perhaps the most obviously distorted of them all, which originally meant wise one connected to the earth. So we can see very much how that became inverted, distorted, associated with the hag, the crone, the evil black magic sorceress. So her wisdom and elemental communion itself was demonized by creating this separation with the witch, this fear, this overlay of fear. We have then subconsciously rejected all the gifts and the wisdom that come along with these archetypes. So the healer, we see this one running through the collective today as we speak. This frequency, this energy of compassion and service that is inverted and distorted into codependence or even saviorism, and giving more than you have, even pouring from that empty cup. We see this rampant in the spiritual collective right now. So again, boundaries being trampled or suppressed. And then finally, we have the oracle. So intuition and psychic gifts, like the gift of sight, have been distorted into fear or confusion or even false prophecy, as well as deemed crazy even. And beyond that, the oracle's voice has been suppressed. The feminine's voice, the feminine's perspective has been outright oppressed, suppressed. Her voice has been taken away in so many different manners, sometimes through outright persecution. So, of course, a lot of these archetypes are embodied within an individual. Multiple can be embodied within the same being. So perhaps you resonate with multiple of these archetypes and the different wounds associated with them, which again, we're going to get into in more depth in a moment. But first, I'd like to dive into the sisterhood wound itself, because this is also running rampant in the collective, and we see it very much so in the spiritual community, those who are awakening, and it's really having a massive effect on our collective ability to come together, to collaborate, to co-create. This is the frequency of cooperation that the divine feminine embodies. And so until we can heal the rifts between us, we are not going to be able to be fully in our power, because when we are collectively shining our light and supporting, a rising tide lifts all boats. When we are supporting one another, this will then shift the frequency of the consciousness, all of us stepping into our power and our leadership and supporting one another. This is what will help to usher in the new paradigm, the new golden age. So what exactly is the sisterhood wound? It is the collective pain, mistrust, and separation that exists between women ourselves. It is a distortion that runs deep in the feminine consciousness, in the feminine collective, through the lineages. It arises from thousands of years of betrayal, competition, jealousy, envy, resentment, and even silencing among women. And yes, this often stems from systemic oppression, patriarchal conditioning, and energetic manipulation of the feminine field. Essentially, we were kind of pitted against each other because we had to fend for ourselves, and it was through manipulation that women learned to regain some degree of foothold of power in this patriarchal paradigm. So it was essentially kind of a survival mechanism. But again, we are here to exit survival mode and embody the divine frequency of being that is in full trust in God's divine guidance. Women were once united as priestesses, healers, oracles, and stewards of the earth. So at its core, this wound stems from when women were turned against each other. So during times like the witch hunts, for example, which is perhaps the most accessible example, sacred feminine gatherings became obviously dangerous. Women learned that visibility, intuition, empowerment, sharing her gifts with the community could actually mean death or exile, and exile was akin to death in certain time periods for many people, of course. So survival itself often required aligning with the dominant power structures, even if it was done so unwillingly or through manipulation. That could even mean betraying or judging other women. So this betrayal frequency still runs through the feminine consciousness, and we see it in relational dynamics where one woman is trying to steal, another woman's man or something like that. That's kind of a common collective example. Or having the whole friend group turn against each other, thinking Mean Girl style, right? So there's a great deal of manipulation that occurs. It's like all of a sudden we decide that person we're going to team up against and bully them and excise them and ostracize them. We still see this, and we also sadly see this in sisterhood circles and priestess circles within the spiritual community. And I experienced this myself, which I will share in a moment. But the result is essentially this subconscious pattern of comparison, of distrust, and fear of intimacy or collaboration amongst women. So it keeps us in this frequency, this energy of separation consciousness running through us because of that fear of betrayal, that fear of judgment. We have this deep mistrust of self as well as other that is running through us. There is a great deal of gaslighting and manipulation that can come through this energy as well. So many still carry echoes of these memories of betrayal by the sisterhood themselves, being betrayed by a sister or an entire group of women, where they were the ones who were turned away in order for the rest to stay safe. Or perhaps even where they were the one to turn away in order to stay safe. So they didn't stand up for the other woman. They didn't stand up and speak up on her behalf. So that would carry a frequency of guilt and shame. But then that frequency of guilt and shame is often projected onto the other individual, right? So the sisterhood wound often manifests as envy, jealousy, resentment, as well as outright betrayal. But it could just be this frequency, this energy that creates this energetic rift between people. And this often happens in women who hold a lot of that distorted lunar consciousness, and they see in the divine solar feminine what they could have become had they not lost themselves in the darkness. So they carry this energy of pain and rage and bitterness and resentment that they cannot grapple with, and so they must project it onto the other person to make them the problem so that they don't have to face themselves within. So the true divine feminine does, in fact, receive, unfortunately, a great deal of projection from others because her light activates and amplifies the wounds not yet healed in others, not yet integrated. So her energy itself is alchemical in nature, to the point of even being triggering. So this is where that rift comes to the fore, and this is where that betrayal energy, that projection energy can then come to the surface in those who are not grounded, embodied, integrated, who haven't grappled with their own woundings. And yes, it's the trauma and the pain of the inner child that causes this projection, this betrayal. So we get to hold compassion for those who are operating in this frequency because there is this self-hatred underlying it a lot of the time. It can be as extreme as self-hatred. And it's actually quite sad when you witness it and another just how much they are in pain and how much that anger and rage and bitterness and resentment is taking over them. And so again, we get to hold compassion and firm boundaries when we see or experience this in another. Because they are going through this, it does not mean that we have to take it on. So this is the compassionate healer learning to have strong boundaries and to understand what is her energy and what is not her own. So the sisterhood wound often reacts to the light, not because of genuine hatred of the other, but this painful remembrance of what was lost. And it can manifest more as this self-hatred that they cannot actually grapple with. And we do see this through the dark mother frequency as well. The dark mother can often project onto the daughter holding pure, divine, feminine, holy Sophianic coding, perhaps. But that projection, again, is rooted in wounding. So we have to understand that this goes through the lineage and that we are the one to stop the pattern because we have the awareness and the capacity and the alchemical power to do so. So those of us who receive this kind of energy from people, we're being called up. We're being called within to do this work and to end the pattern and to do our best to hold that frequency of love and compassion, even in the face of very dark energy. And so this is when energetic protection also comes into play, because I have dealt with this myself in the form of extreme spiritual attack as well. So it wasn't just the public accusation of doing black magic on somebody. This is what happened to me. A former friend, healer, teacher, roommate even, She accused me publicly of doing black magic on her. And when I finally learned that she had accused me of doing this, things had already gone sour between us, obviously. There had already been a ton of gaslighting, projection, and I fell into a frequency of self-doubt and mistrust of self because I had slightly pedestalized her because she was my reader. She was my healer. She had taught me certain practices. And I now see that she was trying to cozy up to me because she saw in the readings that she had done and in the healing session, she had seen my energy and my codes, and she saw something that she wanted. And I didn't know it for a long time that she had, in fact, placed a siphon in my womb to steal my coding and my abundance and my light and all of that, right? And this is what she had accused me of doing. And it was really astonishing because I was like, and she accused me of harming so many people, which was extremely painful. That activated wounding from the past of being accused and persecuted in past lifetimes, of course. And in the moment, that wound was triggered and activated. So I couldn't remember my own truth. And this is how insidious it gets. But then having done the work, and it took some time, honestly, because she is powerful. Unfortunately, she chose to wield her power in service to darkness. But when I was able to finally extract myself from the pain and from the bitterness that was arising within me, how could she do this to me? This betrayal, Like, why would she say this to me? Once I finally stopped mistrusting myself, then I got angry. And so I had to really alchemize all of that. And what it did was bring me so much deeper into myself that I remembered the potency and the power of the gifts that I actually hold and my coding. And then I was able to see with clarity the jealousy and the envy and the resentment, but most of all, the pain that she was operating within. And it reminded me of these visuals I had seen of her energy field that was dark and wounded and painful. And then I remembered how she herself had channeled that my soul had always been in service to the light. So it was kind of ridiculous for me to even entertain that accusation also because I know myself. And I never worked with people in that way. I only relatively recently started doing one-on-one energy sessions, and this was after a great deal of purification of my field. So I learned the tools to clear fields, to do defense against the dark arts. So in a sense, it was a gift because it brought me deeper into the womb healing, specifically the crystalline womb codes that I work with are incredibly potent and pure. And so I can see the gift in the entire experience, and I can also see just how ridiculous it was for me to ever give power to that narrative. But what it did was also help me to face the sisterhood wounds because it is really hurtful. It is really not fun to grapple with that. So we are in the collective process of healing and reclamation of these wounds. So healing the sisterhood wound begins by remembering that true sisterhood is the restoration of the divine feminine anchoring in unity, where each woman honors her own essence while also holding the space for others to shine equally, to rise and shine together. So part of the collective awakening is this deep reclamation of that template of feminine cooperation, of sisterhood circles, of mutual empowerment, and shared remembrance of the sacred. So it is actually when women gather in integrity and authenticity and love, when we celebrate each other rather than compete, when we support rather than judge, the ancient codes of the feminine temples reawaken. We can then dissolve the energetic imprint of betrayal and return to the frequency of trust, truth, and co-creation. So let's dive deeper now into the specific woundings of the priestess, the witch, the queen, and then we'll move on to the oracle, the healer, and the virgin. So, what is the priestess wound and how does it manifest? So, a priestess is kind of all encompassing in certain senses. A priestess can be a healer, an oracle, a visionary, a medicine woman, which is kind of akin to the archetype of the witch, right? She can be a ceremonial leader. She can be a priestess queen. So, in a sense, the priestess is a powerful archetype and it has been heavily, heavily distorted and overlaid. We see this in a lot of the current modern priestess teachings. Many women are out there passing on teachings through a frequency of distortion. She's still operating in this sisterhood wound energy or the Jezebel energy, which we talked about in the previous video. So we have to really get clear with ourselves and again, use that discernment as we purify our own fields and our own consciousness of the wounding as we engage in these teachings. A lot of the goddess teachings contain distortion. Not that all of the goddesses are evil or distorted, but some of them have AI clone overlays. And so we've got to get very clear with ourselves. Lunar overlays. Again, we've got to purify our field and recognize that certain practices perhaps might not be for the modern times. Working with specific blood rituals, for example, may want to rethink that. So back in the day, the priestess held a position of great import in the community. This was a position of nobility even. She held a frequency of reverence and respect from the community, was very much supported by the community. So the priestess would go through rites of passage and she held the spiritual health of the community in her heart. So she served through this frequency of devotion. She was in that frequency of service to other. So according to physical archaeological evidence, goddess timelines of goddess cultures extend back to 29,500 BC or so, with the Venus of Willendorf, Austria. There was a statue that is named the Venus of Willendorf, Austria, to be clear. So we can see that this timeline of the feminine being in power, of the feminine being revered, extends back through many millennia. And it is only in the last 4,000 or 5,000 years that things became distorted, inverted, and patriarchal. So monotheistic patriarchal culture arose only, again, in the last 5,000 years, and in 2700 BC was the first record of war and land ownership. So this is when we can really see in the historical records, take history with a grain of salt still, but this is when we can see the simultaneous rise of patriarchal culture and the fall, the demise of goddess culture. So a lot of the wounding for many women who hold these templates will extend back to around that time. So over the coming centuries, through patriarchal rule, through the rise of patriarchal religion, the feminine was relegated deeper and deeper into the shadows, thus veiling her gifts more and more until she herself fully denied and ultimately forgot them. And the truth is, sometimes the pain of remembering the persecution can feel like too much to bear. So we do have to be gentle with ourselves. And I really like to encourage people to focus on the physical vessel and the vessel that is containing the wounds of this lifetime first and foremost, to regulate the nervous system, to heal the body, to get the mind right before going deep into past life remembrance and galactivations and stuff. So feelings of guilt, shame, fear of our own power can come to the surface, and it can feel like a lot to grapple with. We can try to put the lid back on it as it begins to rise and reawaken within us. And then this sisterhood wound of competition and envy then can amplify these feelings of mistrust of our own power. And yeah, I dealt with that myself. So the witch wound, how do we define the witch wound? The witch wound is very similar to the priestess wound in certain regards, but the witch wound itself is this energy of rejection, of abandonment, of being exorcised and outcast from the community, left out of the circle, seen and cast as a fraud, perhaps, undervalued, underappreciated, being made to be crazy or too much can actually be part of the witch wound. So we see that as a common feminine wound, but it can be connected to this energy of being the witch who had a lot of power and was out in the community healing, perhaps, you know? So there's this energy of toning it down, suppressing your true self, suppressing your voice, playing small, this frequency of persecution and being misunderstood is a very common one. So there can be a fear of being cast as a fraud or getting accusations. So this is often, of course, associated with paganism and earth magic. So there's a lot of distortion in those practices to this day because paganism did fall. It wasn't always rooted in sacrifice and things like that. Those rituals are distorted rituals, to be very clear. There is a lot of distortion that came through paganism toward the end of its paradigm. But paganism itself also had a golden age. This is a whole topic of conversation for another time. But to be very clear, there are pure undistorted, undiluted practices that are considered pagan because what a pagan is basically an earth-based tradition, so connected to the earth magic and the elementals. And in its pure form, there's a lot of power in that. And again, it's that power itself that was deliberately suppressed. So this is what we're in the process of reclaiming, but at the same time, we've got to purify the practices, and not all of it is meant to come forward with us, right? So then we have the Virgin Queen or the Queen, but the queen is a distortion. A lot of the distorted queen archetype templates, anyway. There's a distortion of false royalty that's been running through the collective consciousness for the last however millennia as well. It's false royalty that has taken over the world. And there's this energy of greed and selfishness and extraction that comes through these royal lineages, these false royals. But then also just looking at the Virgin Queen, Queen Elizabeth I, she was sovereign and powerful. Yet she also, in order to maintain her hold on power, to maintain her throne, she had to deny herself the experience of love, of passion, of pleasure, because she could not trust the men around her. So she couldn't trust anyone. So even the women who held positions of power over history, a lot of them held deep wounding because of what they had to deny for themselves. So there's this suppression of the feminine essence. And this embodiment of the masculine that we see in modern day feminism of pantsuit nation type energy. There's a distortion in that. We're not meant to put on a pantsuit and step into the role, the frequency, the energy of the masculine. We're meant to lead from our own essence and energy in order to truly shift the paradigm. So the queen would have had to engage in manipulation and dangerous political games for the sake of obtaining and keeping the crown. And we even see that reflected in modern day democratic politics. So again, of course, royals are known for lavish extravagance and excess. They're known for being greedy and selfish a lot of the time. Not all, of course. Like Princess Diana held Grail Queen coding. But many of the royal lines are corrupted. So what we're doing is restoring the true royal Grail codes, the royal Grail codes of the king and the queen archetype together. So to make a distinction there, again, the queen and the king are divine archetypes in their original form, but our current modern perception is very distorted. So again, the royals now are operating in the frequency of distortion. They are not royal, and the distortion of hierarchy itself and extraction rather than being of service to the population, like a priest king or something like that, or a priestess queen, where they're receiving divine guidance for the benefit of their people. So the healer archetype is, of course, often associated with the feminine energy anyway. We see Cancer and Virgo archetypes running through it. So we have Cancer, the mother, and Virgo, the goddess. And the inversions of the two kind of run through the frequency, the energy of the healer. So we have this self-sacrifice, this martyrdom, this overgiving, this service to other, but forgetting to fill our own cup kind of energy moving through the healer. So there is actually a fair amount of ego that comes into play there, because the ego benefits from this energy of martyrdom, and then they can resent people for not recognizing how much they're giving. So it's this over giving that is unacknowledged, and then this energy of bitterness can run through as they're operating in a frequency of scarcity a lot of the time, even if that's not just financial, but a scarcity of time, of energy, because they're over giving, pouring from that empty cup. So then looking a little bit more deeply at the oracle, in the time of goddess culture, women held the role of the oracle. We see the Oracle of Delphi as the most common, accessible example now. And the narrative is that she was taking substances to receive her wisdom, her divine guidance. The intuition was actually chemically induced, perhaps by a natural chemical, but it does bring a layer of intrigue and interest and potentially even distortion into the narrative of the oracles. But the oracles were controlled as well in a way. So back in the day, their receptivity and the gift of intuition were honored and celebrated. But then it became controlled and in service to the king. And women's voices were shut down. Their truth was suppressed. So we see this running through so many women, as our voices, our throat chakras have been shut down. This is one of my biggest wounds, and it came through in this lifetime, but also I am aware of past lifetimes, and I can see the origin point. And one of my biggest points of reclamation has been working with the throat chakra and visibility. And so this is one of the energies that we're working on in the cosmic womb itself, is nervous system regulation and the reclamation of both the voice and the womb, the centers of creation. So then we have the Virgin. So the Virgin in her energetic state has an energy, a frequency that is pristine, that is pure, that is innocent in its connection to God, to Holy Mother, Holy Father, God. And so in that sense, this is where that energy of purity came from, but that energy of purity became a suppression of sexuality, of sexual energy. So Virgin, again, in its original meaning, meant independent, sovereign, whole, and holy unto herself. She was a woman embodied in her power, in the purity of her power. So the term itself has very clearly been distorted into suppression and control of women's wombs and sexual energy itself. And then we have the opposing archetype of the whore and the harlot. So a woman who allows herself to be sexually liberated, independent, whole, and sovereign unto herself, is mislabeled as a whore and a harlot. And of course, some women are operating in the Jezebel energy that is distorted. So it's an interesting nuance, and this is why there has been so much distortion and self-blame and shame, because we have misperceived what our sexual energy is and the sacredness underlying it. And so it's one extreme or the other, right? So moving into healing these wombs, reclamation happens not through self-judgment, but through integration, by facing the wounds, doing the shadow work, regulating the nervous system, recognizing the patterns as expressions of unmet needs, grief, disconnection from the Holy Mother herself. This is a lot of what I do in the one-on-one sessions of the crystalline womb healing, is restoring that connection, that energy with the Holy Mother, and clearing out those overlays, those energetic imprints of trauma that have often come through the lineage and past lives as well as this lifetime. So when we clear these reversals, these overlays through the womb, through the heart, through the nervous system, the energy itself transfigures back into its original form, its original purpose, which is pure creation, sovereign embodiment, and sacred union itself. So I've mentioned the nervous system a couple times, and I just really want to anchor in that the nervous system itself is one way we can look at it is as the bridge to God. This is somatic spirituality because our nervous system must have the capacity to hold the high frequencies of energy that are coming in, to hold the codes that are being activated within us. If our nervous system isn't grounded and regulated, if we're not grounded in our bodies, we cannot hold the frequency of the activation. And this is where people have nervous system meltdowns, breakdowns, psychosis, even because they cannot hold the frequency of the activation. So the divine feminine is about being in the body. So doing this work within the body, working at a somatic level, is essential. If we're truly going to anchor the frequencies of heaven onto earth, we have to do it through this vessel. This vessel becomes the rainbow bridge. The chakras all activated and the energy flowing in its free and pure form. So regulation is the foundation of energetic sovereignty. This is how we actually become the co-creators, is actually through the body by regulating our nervous system at a fundamental level so we can hold our higher self in our body, in our 3D body. So one of the keys to this is reestablishing that coherence between the mind, the womb, and the heart. And so this is what we're going to go deeper into, this repatterning in the upcoming journey in the cosmic womb, is really getting practical so that we can receive the codes of the Holy Mother, so that we can become the vessel of divinity and allow those frequencies to anchor through us. So to bring this full circle, the truth is that all shadows are really seeking reunion with the Holy Mother, that original separation wound from the mother. Even thinking about physical birth into the 3D, separating from the womb, is a trauma for a new soul incarnating. So then we look at the original separation wound, separation from God, and its Holy Mother, Holy Father God, the Holy Spirit as the feminine essence that was masculinized by the patriarchy. So this is what we are restoring. And when we bring awareness and compassion to these wounds that we're holding, we can then transmute the false light and the false darkness alike. So again, the cosmic womb is the true dark mother void where we can access the codes of love and where rebirth can occur. And so this is also the process of the triple flame activation, the mind, the heart, and the womb, and the voice as the path of activation as well, and integration. So this is the process I'm guiding people through in the cosmic womb. If you would like to go deeper, the details are down below. And the first live round is beginning on 11/11. So if you would like to join and go deeper into reclamation and remembrance, I invite you to join us on this beautiful journey that is unfolding. And you'll get immediate access to Align and Shine, which is a course that I did 2 years ago about the throat and womb activation, plus a few additional activations. And this series is in the back end for ease of viewership. And then we'll go even deeper together live in the 6 weeks between Solar Samhain and Winter Solstice, where we really connect with the Dark Mother portal as a powerful portal of rebirth. Because truly, this is the work of our time to dissolve the distortions, to reclaim our power, and to become the living vessels of the Holy Mother frequencies. So I invite you to join us as we heal these archetypal wounds and restore the living feminine Christ within. And in the next video, we're going to go deeper into cosmic consciousness and the divine feminine. So I look forward to seeing you there, onward and upward, as we journey home to the heart of truth.